Well, hey, friends, welcome back to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn, and today I am so excited to have my guest, Lea Appleton, on my show. So, Lea is an ICF professional certified coach and best-selling author of Walking and Wayfinding, create your own mindful practice one step at a time. She works with professionals to improve their well being at work by helping them align with their values, focus on their strengths, and gain insight into their goals through transformative coaching conversations. She has expertise in using mindful practices to reduce stress and build resilience and help people find meaning and purpose in their lives. Prior to becoming a coach, she spent over 2 decades working in higher education in the United States as an associate dean, helping to build multicultural and interreligious communities. Lea is also a breast cancer survivor for 29 years. Diagnosed at age 29, her early experience dealing with cancer and its treatment shaped the course of her life, causing her to focus on well being and care of others, whether as a dean of students or a certified coach. Lea has a Master of Arts in Music and a Master of Divinity degree, as well as a coach diploma from Erickson Coaching International. She lives in California with her husband, Billy, and has 3 adult children. Well, hello, Lea. How are you doing today?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show. You know, you and I had a wonderful conversation together just recently before we, started this particular episode. And the more I find out about you, the more intrigued I am about you, just your background and your experience, especially when it comes to helping people with stress and anxiety and things like that. And, there's a lot of stress and anxiety in our world right now, which you've got your work cut out for you, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you are a breast cancer survivor of quite some time ago, 29, and you were 29 years old. And I want to
Mhm.
really stage this in a way that is very appalling how many younger women now are getting breast cancer in their 20s, in their 30s. And usually, when people think about breast cancer, well, when we used to think about, should I say, it was usually older women, like me. I was in my 50. I'm 57 now. I was diagnosed when I was 54. And it's just so appalling how many people are getting it so young. And 29 years ago, that was almost unheard of, right? I mean, is that something that you must have been pretty shocked, yes?
Oh, yes. I mean, it was not anywhere on the realm of possibility for me. I don't think, I mean, to be honest, I don't think my doctors, it was on their realm of possibility. Like, oh, it can't be this. I'm sure you have a cyst or whatever. And so it was, I even remember my, surgeon apologizing to my parents because they had come to pick me up from the hospital and he had told them that I would be fine. And he said, I'm really sorry that I assumed everything would be fine. And it will be fine, but not fine in the way we had expected or hoped it to be. So it was I really, really had to advocate for my own care because it wasn't, people didn't get, I couldn't even get a mammogram because it was like, "Oh, we'll do an ultrasound," and I'm like, "Oh, I want a mammogram." So, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a
S-
challenge.
So at age 29, who were you? Like what was going on in your life leading up to this crazy diagnosis?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I had, been recently divorced. I had a young marriage that didn't last, unfortunately. I was a young professional. I was, rebuilding my life. I had lots of friends, so I was just kind of doing things, I would work out and I'd have dinner with friends and I would do the things I enjoyed doing. And it kind of came to a screeching halt at that moment where I was like, whoa, wait a second. I'm healthy. I'm young. This is not supposed to be happening to me. So it was a shock.
So
Yeah.
what happened? What is it that made you uh, how did it all happen? How did you find out?
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of one of those weird stories, I think, because I had a lump that I felt on the other side. And it was big and, I don't know, fibrous. And so the doctors were sure that it was a cyst. And so they weren't particularly concerned about it. But I had this sense in my gut that something wasn't right. And so that's when I went in and I had the ultrasound, and I'm like, yeah, we checked up again in 6 months. And at that point, I said, I really, really want to have a mammogram. And I had a mammogram, and they called and they said, there's something suspicious on the other side. So it was like, what? Because I was just concerned about this thing I could feel. And so, yeah, it ended up being a cancerous tumor, carcinoma, intraductal carcinoma, the kind of the one that happens all the time,
Yes.
unfortunately. It was about 2 centimeters, so it'd been in there for a while. I At that point, I didn't know what to do, right? Like, it was so outside the realm of reality for me. So I did a lot of there, and it was a little bit pre-internet, I mean, you could
Right.
do it, but so it was a lot of asking people questions, and what do you do, and asking doctors questions. And I sought a second opinion, and I went out to Cedars-Sinai, which is, known in the LA area as being, really good. And they were like, yep, yep, these are your options. And so I got really good care. I think my doctors were great, surprised but at this outcome, but they were very supportive, very terrific, allowed me to make my own choices in my care, which I thought was really good. And I remember thinking, I chose to have a mastectomy, and they were also surprised about that. They're like, you're young, why would you want to do that? And I'm like, well, I really don't want to deal with this again. This is terrible. And I was scared. And when I had the biopsy, because of where the tumor was located, it was right in the middle of my breast. So in order to remove it, it changed the shape of my breast. It looked weird to me. The nipple pointed out in a funny direction. And I'm like, I don't want to, no, I want this out, and I don't want to deal with it again. So I chose to have a mastectomy. You mentioned that certainly at that time, it's slightly better now, though I don't think hugely better. All the choices of bras were like, I will never wear that, So things like that were sort of surprising for me as a young person. Swimsuits, no, not going to wear that, So I spent a lot of time working with people and having people make things for me, and I almost started a business. I was like, I'm going to create, clothing that people can wear that
Yeah.
like looks like what I might wear. I didn't end up doing that. But so, yeah, so it was a lot of inquiry, a lot of shock. My friends were super supportive. They threw this giant surprise 30th birthday for me, because I found out at 29, and then I had the birthday party, and I had my surgery, I think the next day or the day after. And so lots of people bringing me food and, loving me and caring for me in this time. But a lot of people didn't know what to say, because, my
Right.
peers at that point had no experience with this either. Maybe their parents, but not with someone their own age. So it was a learning for everybody, I think, in
Yes,
this
for
process.
sure. I think that when somebody has something close to someone close to them who gets a diagnosis like that, it's a learning experience every single time. I know that it was a learning experience for my own husband, for my family, for my friends, which is one of the reasons I started this podcast in the first place. Is I wanted to be able to help educate, not just from my experience, but from a myriad of different experiences, so that people, had a voice to be able to talk about their own experiences and what they learned and all of that. So I'm just thinking, gosh, 29 years ago, what a mind blow for people. It's like this, because usually, too, is that so many people who are older who had it years ago or knew their grandmother had it or whatever. Sometimes it was never even talked about. Like I didn't even know grandma had that,
Mhm.
like it was kept so quiet. And now people are pretty open about it. They're out there and talking about it, which is so important, I think. And it's also a way for people to process. I mean, me talking about it with you and other people is still a way for me to process
Mhm.
what happened, right?
Mhm. Well, and it's
Um,
still a way for me to process it even years and years later, because it's a reality that you live with. It doesn't go away.
yes.
You know,
Yes.
I do think that it's interesting that you mentioned people not talking about it, because people sort of came out of the woodwork, and they were generally older women, and they'd be like, well, I've gone through this. Let me help you. I had this woman take me to like, well, we can find a place to find a bra and they'll sew in a pocket. I'm like, what's that? There were people who said, do you know about, at that point, I don't even know if they have it anymore with the Cancer Society. It was a feel good, be better. Anyway. And it was like makeup and, wigs and things like that. And, but the people came out of the woodwork to really support me in that process. So I very much valued that. I do think that part of it's cancer because it's scary, but part of it is that it's breast cancer and people didn't want to talk about breasts and it
Right.
wasn't okay to say, and you could kind of mask it one way or the other.
Yeah.
People might know.
Well, that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons I joined Know Your Lemons. And I don't remember if we talked about this or not, but Know Your Lemons organization is all about educating people about the 12 signs of breast cancer. And you had mentioned, let me go back a second here. Did you say that you visually did not like the way your breast was looking? What did that look like?
Yes. So after the biopsy, they had to take so much tissue out because it was larger, and it was directly behind my nipple, so it was right in the middle of my breast. So when
Okay.
they would take it out, it changed the shape of it
Right.
in a way that felt uncomfortable to me. And the thing that was interesting is that in my mind, and of course we're not totally thinking clearly, but in my mind it was like every time I look at this is going to remind me, and I'm going to be afraid. And interestingly, my scar doesn't give me that same yucky feeling. It gives me more of this, like, I went through this really difficult thing and this scar is this beautiful.
Empowering.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So the reason I asked that is I couldn't remember if you said it was after the biopsy or not. So I know that we know now that there are 12 signs of breast cancer. There are visual signs and signs that you can feel a lump, right? And but that was one of the reasons I joined Know Your Lemons, because they don't use breasts. They use lemons as visuals because, and I just did an episode with the founder, Corinne, with Know Your Lemons a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the whole process of why she started Know Your Lemons and how she came up with the lemon analogy. It looks like a breast, but it's not a breast, because when we talk about cancer, we think death. And when we talk about breasts, we think sex. And so she didn't want that to be like that. So I like the idea of being able to educate people and they can visually see what they can be looking at their own breast if they have a sign. So, okay. So let's talk about your treatments. You went through the surgery after your birthday. Did you go, what stage was it? And what other treatments did you do?
So my cancer was considered 2+. I don't know if they still do the pluses anymore, but because of its size, I didn't have any lymph node involvement. So that was really great. But because I was young and they were scared, they were like, let's go at this.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing that, as I'm trying to remember back, I really didn't want to do radiation. So I think that was another reason, sort of compounding why I did the mastectomy, because they told me if I did that, I didn't have to do radiation. And I think it was mostly the look, actually, as I think about it. But anyway, so I had 6 months of chemotherapy. And that it was not great. It was not the best moments of my life. I was working, so I took leave because I didn't feel well. I was sick a lot. It extended longer than 6 months because I got some reactions. Like I got thrush in my mouth and, some of the things I don't talk about where, everything's going at your body and all these other immune responses can happen. So, so I got sick and had to wait and it stretched out a little bit longer than I would have liked. It was interesting. I don't even remember her name, which is a little bit sad, but an acquaintance. I didn't know this person very well. So if she's listening out here, she taught anthropology at UC Riverside. And she came and would meet me after my appointments. And she'd bring me a dozen donuts. And we'd sit on the floor and we'd eat donuts. And those are the times you're supposed to be eating healthy and you're supposed to be, but it was like, it was so perfect. It was almost this like, take that. And it was lovely. And she's like, I don't know what to tell you. I can't make it better, but let's just enjoy this sweet treat together. And it was
Yeah.
the most beautiful thing. It kind of makes me teary as I think about it, because I felt very cared for. And I felt like, there really isn't anything that's going to make it better.
Right.
Let's just enjoy this and have the
Yeah.
sweetness of this moment of a human being caring for another human being, enjoying a big box of donuts.
I have a friend of mine, when I got cancer, she told me that she had had breast cancer. I don't know how long ago, but after she got her chemo treatments, they used to go to a Mexican restaurant and just drink a bunch of margaritas and
I
stuff.
love
And
it.
like nowadays, you'd be like, okay, sugar, alcohol. Yeah, no, that's not something we should be doing. That feeds the cancer, right?
Right.
And I stopped drinking altogether during
Mhm.
cancer, and eating any sugar. I had sugar
Mhm.
substitutes and things like that. But the whole idea, though, for that you're talking about is this: you felt cared for, like you had somebody who really truly cared about you and your mental state. Um, it She was a person that you could hold on to,
Mhm.
who you know, supported you. And I
Mhm.
think that that is something that we all need. And sometimes they come out of the woodwork, right?
Mhm.
Like we
Mhm.
don't even know these people, and and that happened to me. I had a lot of people who, would reach out to me and I didn't even know them. Some of them I still have never met in person.
Wow.
They just, and we're still in touch. Like we're on
Mhm.
Facebook together or
Mhm.
whatever. They follow me on Instagram and stuff like that. So you went through all the loss of hair and no,
What was
no.
weird was, yeah, my hair on my head did not fall out. So the particular chemo that I had very small percentage of people whose hair on their head. So the hair everywhere else went out. No eyebrows.
Okay.
That all
Interesting.
was weird. I cut my hair just in case, right? And then therefore I sported this great fun little haircut. But I asked them about it, and the treatment that they chose, they saved the strongest one in case I needed it again. And I
Oh, okay.
remember thinking, I don't like this, but they're like, well, we want to see if this works, and if it comes back, or if it doesn't work, then we have a backup. So that is at least what they told me. Yes, it was a little bit strange it thinned, but it didn't fall out. But I was sick, and I did, like I said, I got all these other kind of weird responses to the chemo that were a little bit unexpected. But yeah, so the I don't have that experience, so I can't really speak to what that was like to lose my hair, since other than there was this sense of like, oh, well, maybe, I don't have a real treatment, or there was a little bit of, I don't know, like, uh,
Is this gonna work? Is this,
oh,
yeah,
like, because it would be better if I lost my hair, then I'd be sure that it was terrible.
yeah,
Maybe it would be making it do that. Yeah. So there was a
right.
little bit, it felt a little bit uncomfortable. And then there was this sense of like, well, from other cancer patients, which is fine, but it was like, well, you don't know what it's like. It's not as terrible as, so it was a little bit weird. After the fact, I realized, we each deal with this in our own ways. And,
Sure.
sometimes we don't know how we're going to respond. So they're all forgiven.
Well, it's uncharted territory. I mean, I remember when I found out I was gonna lose my hair and I was just obviously devastated. And there were some people who were like, "Oh, Jamie, you're gonna be fine, and then your hair is gonna grow back, and it grows back pretty quickly." And they were trying to, like talk me off the ledge and stuff like that. But I mean, I feel like you just kind of have to go through the grieving of these things in your own way and talk to the people who are going to let you do that.
Mhm.
I think that's super important to say, yeah, it really sucks. This is like, I'll just say it. This is shitty. I'm
Mhm.
like, I am very much an advocate for letting people scream into the air and just let yourself grieve. And looking back, I did allow myself to do that. And I did get a badass haircut before I started the chemo because I wanted to take control of it myself. That's what I was told that would be a really good idea. And I always had long blonde hair forever, for
Mhm.
as long as I can remember. And I cut my hair into this really cool, badass haircut. I shaved the whole entire
Mhm.
side over here, had an A line that came down here, and I actually really loved it.
Mhm.
And then I told my husband, I said, now, once it starts coming out, this is when I want you to shave my head. And so we did. And so it
Mhm.
started falling out. I brought the clippers. We went on a little vacation and
Mhm.
brought it, and he shaved it. And
Mhm.
I actually ended up really liking my shaved head.
Mhm.
I was G.I. Jamie,
There
he
you go.
called me. And then when it started growing back, I've gone through, it came back really super dark and super curly. Long story short, I keep cutting it, and, like, I keep
Mhm.
it short.
Mhm. Yeah. I kept my hair short for a long, long time and then sort of in rebellion grew it out. So I'm the old
Yeah.
lady with the long hair. But yeah, it was interesting. So I remember going to, I think it was Look Good, Feel Better. That was the thing that the Cancer Society used to do. And so they had these places where they were giving out wigs. And so I went, and of course I was the youngest in the group by, I don't know, 40 years or something, it seemed like. And so they had all these wigs, and so they were so delighted because they had some of these wigs that they were like, you know, these, you could wear this one. We can't, but you could. So they kept trying all these wigs on me. It was really funny. And I didn't end up losing my hair, but I got these wigs anyway, and I still have them. And my children have worn them for Halloween costumes.
Halloween costumes, I never wore I got a really amazing wig at the
Mhm.
beginning, and I never wore it. I wore
Mhm.
turbans and
Mhm.
beanies, or I went bald in my
Mhm.
house. I didn't
Mhm.
usually do that outside of my house, but,
Mhm.
I ended up wearing the wig, for a costume, a murder mystery costume
Mhm.
thing,
Yes.
and I love it. It's super cute, but I just never. So, um, how did you manage your treatments without a caregiver? Because you didn't have a
Mhm.
caregiver.
Mm-mm.
You had gone through a divorce. So how I know, and of course you had your friends. So tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. So I had a dog and a cat. And so I spent a lot of time with my pets crying into their, having them console me. And they were amazing because pets can be amazing in that kind of way,
Yes.
and they know when you're not happy and they don't say anything wrong or anything. And so it's perfect. So in that sense, I felt good. I didn't feel lonely. And I had some people, I just kind of figured it out. I figured out what I could cook and what I could eat. I had different people, from what I recall. I have different people who took me to treatments. Like, it wasn't one person every time. So I had kind of and this was before like Caring Bridge or those kinds of things too, right? So this was just word of mouth and friends and things. And so people volunteered. And so I had different people at different times, and that was nice. And then I had my friend, who'd bring me donuts, and other friends who'd bring me other food and things like that. So it was, I don't know if I can actually answer that question of how I managed. It's just that I did, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that in some ways, I think I do recall getting some brochures from the doctor or the Cancer Society or something where it was like, have your kids set the table for you, have your spouse or partner do whatever. They probably called it husband, 30 years ago. But anyway,
Mhm.
and I remember thinking, well, that's great because that's not going to happen. So I just figured it out, and I used the friends and resources of the people that I had, and I didn't expect a lot from myself. I allowed myself to do what I needed to do, and I think it was an opportunity. I do remember thinking, okay, this is a character building opportunity. I don't need this. I like my
Mhm.
character very well, thank you, as it is, but I'm going to see how I can grow and learn from this. And I just did. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I think the thing for me is, and I found this throughout the course of my treatment and beyond, is that, so what's the alternative? The
Right.
alternative is I can curl up in a ball in
Mhm.
bed and not eat and not do what I need to do for my health. Or I can find some resolve, something left inside me to face this. And that's what I did. Mhm.
I like how I think I had that thought process when I was going through it too. What is the alternative? You either curl up and maybe die,
Mhm.
or be depressed the whole entire time that you have breast cancer, or you find the joy in every opportunity that you can. So
Mhm.
I know for me, we had to cancel several important trips.
Mhm.
That was very devastating. And my husband and I decided that we were going to take our 2 German Shepherd dogs, who were wonderful to me the whole entire time, especially Delilah, who died 1 year ago. She got me through the death of my mother and through my cancer. And so we decided that we were going to do what we love to do best, and that is to take the dogs and go camping. So
Mhm.
every time I had a treatment, I got over the ick.
Mhm.
Then the second week, I felt a little bit better. By the third week, I felt fairly normal. And that's when we would go camping. And
That's
so
great.
we would enjoy that time together. And we went to the new places and things like that. So that was incredibly helpful. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I drank my non-alcoholic IPA beer and, like,
Mhm.
okay. So because of the contrast, maybe of what you went through versus maybe what you're seeing today, because there's a lot more support out there, so much more. Like you were talking about, bras and things like that. I just interviewed someone also named Leah who she developed a bra, a surgical bra,
Mhm.
because of her experience with her mother having breast cancer.
Mhm.
And she's 24 years old. She has 3 strands and like the recovery bras, and it was really cool. So you had that thought process, but you went into you're doing what you're doing right now gives back to the breast cancer community also. Can you explain what that is and how that gives back to the breast cancer community or any community
Well,
really who's people who are struggling?
yeah. Well, unfortunately, cancer is something that if it doesn't happen to us, it happens to someone we know and very often to someone we deeply care about. And so it allows me a moment of empathy to be able to hear in ways. And, depending on the situation, I don't always share lots of my personal story in coaching because that's not really what it's about. But if a person shares a cancer diagnosis, I'll ask them if they want to, you know, hear a little bit about mine. And most of the time, I think part of it is I can show that you can live after cancer. And I know that isn't true for everybody, unfortunately, but it can happen. And it's good to know that there are people out there who've lived long and, lovely lives, and that it's possible to be able to be a person of hopefulness. Certainly as a coach, being able to be there for people to help develop coping mechanisms for stress and uncertainty that happen regardless of whether or not you have cancer. It's just compounded, I think, when there's a serious illness, whether it's cancer or not. I mean, there's lots of other things that people have to deal with too. So that it helps me feel more human, or maybe, yeah, in the sense that I have a deeper understanding for people who go through struggle, and I don't have to know or understand all of it, but that I can know that it's hard and I can be one of those people that's there for them regardless. And the nice thing about coaching is I don't have to fix it, like, because you can't fix it anyway, but it's part of my profession. I'm there to support and help people figure out what it is that they need. Um, Yeah. In terms of, giving back to the cancer community, one of the things that I've thought about is um, doing some volunteer coaching. I haven't done it yet. I do a lot of pro bono coaching for other kinds of causes and to support women in other situations. But that may be something I think about more in the future. Yeah.
Nice, nice. So how do people communicate with you? How do they get a hold of you? What is it? What do your sessions, I mean, are you online? Are you
Yep. I'm online at appletoncoaching.com. And I work for a couple of companies. So sometimes people are able to work with me because their company contracts with it, but I also take private clients. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram because that's my walking page. Because I wrote a book about walking, which is also lovely when you think about it. Because I know, at least for me, when I was going through my treatment, golly, I could barely walk around the block. Like I just didn't. I had been an avid runner and just didn't feel like I could have the energy to do that. So walking was um, a lower energy, lower impact type of activity that I could do. I think now, um, if if I were to have to deal with cancer again, I'd probably do that a lot more than I did. I did it a little
Yeah.
bit, but because I found the benefits and the sort of the physical as well as psychological benefits of walking.
You and I have some parallels. I used to be an avid runner myself, and I remember when I went to chemo school,
Mhm.
one of the things that they said is, look, and even other people like
Mhm.
therapists that I talk to, when you go through your treatments, at the very least,
Yep.
get up and walk every day, every couple hours,
Mhm.
even if it's just to the mailbox and back,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so that's what I tell people that I know who've gotten cancer. I say, you know what, whatever you do, get up and walk.
Mhm.
I know that it helps with the efficacy.
Mhm. Absolutely.
It helps with, getting it through your body.
Mhm.
And so we used to take a walk every night
Mm.
around dusk and
Mhm.
in a beautiful sunset around the block, the big block. And I would just sweat it out. And I remember getting back inside, even though I was so exhausted, I was sweating and I could feel it coming out my pores. Having a nice shower was always nice. But that walking piece is so, so important. If we find ourselves sitting on the couch, just peeled to the couch the whole time, that's probably not good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I also think that there's something about being outside, whether you're dealing with cancer or whether you're dealing with something else,
Yeah.
that can remind you that there is life outside just what you know right here in front of you. And so
Yeah.
I think that that can be really healing. Mhm.
The sun comes up and beats down on your face. Of course, when you're going through chemo, they say try not to be in the sun too much. But I used to sit out in our backyard, and so I had these a CBD THC balm that
Mhm.
would help with bone pain. I used to get it in my
Mhm.
jaw and all of. So I remember sitting out back, and I had a little tincture to put in my coffee, like a peppermint tincture of the CBD. And I remember just sitting out there in the sun when the balloon races were going on and drinking
Mhm.
my coffee with my CBD,
Mhm.
and it had a little tad touch of THC in it, not much, but
Mhm.
just enough. And same with the balm. And I remember sitting out there going, yeah, I really feel like crap, but this is really beautiful. And I've got my dogs here and I can see the balloons, and I was sort of more calm.
Mhm. Yeah, well,
Anything that works, man.
right.
Anything that
Anything
works.
that works. And, it's funny as you say that, that was not as well, it wasn't as easily accessible
Right.
for me. However, I did have one person who was like, "Here's some pot brownies. This is gonna help you." It was very funny. But I actually went up to San Francisco with a friend of mine, and we met up with some other friends. And, unfortunately, when I was going through chemo, there were still lots of things in San Francisco that supported people with AIDS and HIV. But there were places you could go, and you could get pot. And they were like, "We'll help and support you in this." I'm like, "No, it's because you want it." It was really funny. And then we're like, "We'll go out to eat," because I had no appetite, because I didn't feel like it. But I remember just people trying to be creative and trying to
Yep.
find ways to support. I'm glad there's a lot more opportunities and a lot more research on the things that can really help people feel
Right.
better.
Well, it may I'm and I've never been like somebody who was like always a pot smoker or anything, because it makes me
Yeah, me
paranoid.
neither. So that they all thought
But
that was very funny. It
but
didn't-
yeah, I mean, I did have a friend of mine get me the RSO oil.
Hmm.
And so I would do a little bit of that, and I was very careful about it. And I will tell you that that did help me relax, and it did help my stomach, and it also helped with my appetite. So I never ever got through the whole entire thing. It's sitting around somewhere. When I was going through that, it was absolutely so helpful. So helpful. And I was so grateful that somebody brought that to me as a gift. I was
Yeah,
like, and I
exactly.
had gummies and stuff like that. Well, we talk about, cancer shaping the course of your life. I mean, you kind of have entered into our story as we've been talking. Is there anything else you'd like to share with that? Like, what is your thought process? I'm assuming that you went into this coaching primarily because of that, or was there something else that came about that had you develop that coaching program?
Mhm. What's interesting is that, I'd been in higher education for my career, and COVID was one of the reasons that so COVID was like the whole world had cancer, And so I think that was another impetus, much more of a more current impetus. But what's interesting is that it's kind of connected back to this part of me that maybe it wasn't so much in the forefront. Um, by that point in my life. When the one thing that I would share that I think was really helpful for me was, and I share this when people ask, is that I had to reframe what it meant to be okay. Because I was afraid. I didn't want to die. Nobody seemed to know whether or not I would or not. And because this was, again, kind of there weren't a lot of people my age going through this. I didn't really know. I had my particular cancer, when they do so many more tests on it now than they did then, but it was ER/PR negative, and they thought, oh, this is super aggressive, this is problematic, etc. So I wanted to be okay, but I didn't feel okay. Like, the whole thing was not okay.
Right.
I didn't want to go through it, as you had mentioned. Like, I didn't want to have this just be the most, if this was the end of my life, I didn't want it to be the worst experience ever, because this was all I had. So I really had to readjust what it meant to be okay. And that's the thing that has stayed with me my entire life since then. Like, I may not like this, but I can be okay. And I no longer ever say, oh, thank God for my health, because I may not have my health and I can still be okay, even if my health isn't what I want. I have some after effects of chemo now. A lot of the soft tissue and my cartilage isn't good. My gums haven't been good. So I've had to deal with a lot of that as I age. More so, I think, I mean, you deal with that anyway when you age, but this has been kind of exacerbated by, they think, by the chemo. They don't know for sure. But the being okay with where things are as they are, has really helped, because life has all sorts of uncertainty that comes. It's not just cancer, there's many, many other things, and it helped me be able to be both accepting and resilient at the same time.
I like that. Yeah. And, we all go through such crazy things throughout our lives. Some people more than others. And, each time something happens, we have to figure out a way to be okay, or
Mhm.
to redefine who we are and
Mhm.
redefine what we're going through. I mean, you and I were talking before we started recording. Right now with our country, there's a lot of people who are struggling. And I think it's important for people to know that there are a lot of people who are struggling, whether people agree with why or not or whatever. We have to watch out for that. And we have to help people figure out a way to find a purpose and, things like that, and to go on with life. What advice do you have for people who've never been diagnosed with breast cancer? You talk about how you were stage 2 and that you had no lymph node involvement. That's the same with me. I was HER2 positive, ERPR negative. And they still took, when I did my surgery, they still took like 4 lymph nodes, 3
Mhm.
from one side and 1 from the other side, just
Mhm.
for good measure. So we know today, really knew then as well, but really, really drive home the point that early detection is
Mhm.
where it's at.
Mhm.
And so for me, I'm like all about listen to your body. If there's something that's abnormal, like you had to advocate for
Mhm.
yourself, no, I don't care what age you are.
Mhm.
If that something is abnormal, you need to advocate for yourself and get something done. And I will tell you that I have had to actually advocate for myself to get screened
Mhm.
since my surgery. So I had the deep flap surgery, which is the autologous surgery. They take the tissue from your abdomen. And I was told that I don't need mammograms anymore. I don't need anything anymore. This is what I've been told. And it's scary to me because, I hear all the time people getting, reoccurrences. And I think to myself, how will I ever know if there's a reoccurrence if I'm never getting screened or I don't feel something, right?
Mhm.
And so about a year ago, maybe about a year to a year and a half ago, I actually went into my gynecologist and said, hey, I feel a lump. And I really did feel a lump.
Mhm.
And I said, but I don't have any mammograms or anything scheduled. So she actually was able to get me in to get an ultrasound.
Mhm.
Turned out okay.
Mhm.
This time, I have been feeling sensations and different things that have not set well with me. And I was able to advocate for myself to get an ultrasound. But then they just told me that they're going to do a diagnostics mammogram too. I'm like, that's weird because I was told that you don't get mammograms after, but they're going to do it anyway. We're doing
Mhm.
it on Friday. And I had to advocate for myself to do that. because if I do get it back, I would like to be able to get it back in the lower stages so that I have a chance to live, right? So that's always my biggest piece,
Mhm.
there. What kind of advice do you think that you, and even if it's, similar,
Mhm.
what do you usually tell people?
Mhm. Well, I think definitely self-advocate, and even if you don't have one of those symptoms, you mentioned there's 12 symptoms, maybe
Yeah.
there's nothing you can see. Because, like, for me, I just had a sense. It's weird. If you have a sense, better to find out it's nothing than to just be like, "Oh, no, people would think I was weird," or whatever. Like, if you're uncomfortable, get it checked out for whatever the reason is. And if your doctor doesn't do it, find a different one,
Right.
because there are plenty of doctors who will be able to support you in that process. So, yes. The other thing is that for people who, well, I think there's two things. One is cancer is a very individual, it's a collective experience and an individual experience, and all of our, um, we're going to all go through it differently. And so if you know someone, they may not be, if your friend has it, it may be different than when your aunt had it, which may be
Mhm.
different than when grandpa or whatever, right? So that recognizing that fortunately, each new opportunity is this kind of new thing, for the person. And so therefore, you can learn things, but don't always assume that people are going to experience a cancer, or that you're going to, if you have it, end up getting diagnosed, that you're going to experience it just like the people you know. So that's, I think, an important thing to remember. The other thing is, um, what was helpful for me, even though I was really shocked, um, I was healthy, and I still am healthy. And I took care of myself. And it is a lot easier to face a difficult medical diagnosis if you've been taking care of yourself, if you
Yes.
have, social connections and resources, if you have exercise routines and you eat relatively well, and you know what I mean? So I think that if someone doesn't have some of those things in place, now's a good time, you
Yeah,
know,
for
because
sure.
the more that you do to take good care of yourself all the way around, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, socially, all those parts of well-being, it's a little bit easier to do when things are going well. And then you'll have resources, in the event that something happens that surprises you and takes you sideways, because cancer does
Right.
that. Mhm.
Right. That is such a good piece of advice, because when I was diagnosed, I was also very healthy. I had even just lost weight that I had gained during COVID. And, I was exercising, I was eating really well, all the things. And people were pretty shocked that I got breast cancer because they're like, "Oh my God, you were healthy." And I'm like, "I am healthy."
Mhm.
And like I say in a lot of my episodes, healthy people can get cancer. We all have cancer cells. We all
Mhm.
have those cells, right?
Mhm.
But healthy people can get cancer. And the point is that you want to be healthy. Like,
Mhm.
you don't want to say, "Well, I guess I'm just going to be unhealthy because, I'm
Nothing
everybody
wrong
gets
so
cancer,
far.
so I might as
Right.
well just do all this stuff. Why am I taking care of my body if I'm probably going to get cancer anyway?"
Yeah.
No, the point is that you can get through the treatments
Huh.
easier.
Mhm.
It's never easy, but you can get through it easier than if you were not healthy. And so that's what, the point that we need
Mhm.
to drive home for sure. Well,
Mhm.
we are so lucky to have you in our community, Leah. We need people like you. And I actually did reach out when I was like in my deep, dark,
Mhm.
crazy, "Oh my God, I have cancer." It was in the middle of the night. And I got onto Facebook and I was searching around for help. And I found this guy, Eddie Enever, and he's a 3-time cancer survivor in Australia. And he became a therapist because it's almost
Mhm.
like he cracked the code, like to figure
Mhm.
out why this was happening.
Mhm.
And he became a therapist. And I sent him a message on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'm in the United States. I just got cancer. I ran across your page. I'm wondering if we might be able to talk about how you can help me." And he responded back very quickly. We had a few sessions together. He helped me learn what kind of foods were really good to eat, what supplements that you should and should not take. And he even talked to me about enemas and all that stuff. And ultimately I ended up interviewing him, and
Mhm.
I read to him the message that I sent to him and
Mm.
what he sent back to me. It was very powerful. So reaching out to a therapist like you to help people, if you get, God forbid, get this cancer, reaching out to people like you to help navigate
Mhm.
everything. And I actually have a therapist that I still to this day talk to here in Reno, and she's helped me through other things since cancer. Is just so helpful because being able to talk about it, cry about it, scream about it, laugh about it, all the things is so
Mhm.
important.
Well, and I'm not a therapist, but as a coach, those we are trying to help people through,
Right.
get through crises as well. The other thing I would say, and I'll just say this in closing because I know we're coming to the end of our time, but one of the things we didn't talk about, but if someone is curious and wants just to hear this part of my story, they're welcome to reach out, is that I had kids after cancer. I breastfed babies with one breast, and so that can be possible as well. And that's
Good.
a great part of my story.
Yeah, that is a great part, because life does go on and you
Mhm.
are able to do that.
Mhm.
I mean, I've had people that I've interviewed who were pregnant at the time that they
Mhm.
got cancer. It's like, how does that work? um, well, so I in the show notes I have how to reach you on Instagram, and how to reach you on LinkedIn, and also your website, appletoncoaching.com, and your phone number and your email address. I also Do you have a link to your
If you go on my website, there's a thing that says book. You click on that and you can find it there.
How easy is that? Well, Lea, this has been such a joy to talk to you. You have such a powerful story, a powerful message, and you give back to the community in ways that we absolutely 100% need. And I just appreciate your being here. Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I think just to go back to the thing that I learned through my process is that I wish for you and for others who are going through cancer or who may in the future be able to figure out and be okay,
Yeah.
okay enough, okay in that moment. And my hope for you all is that you can.
Awesome. Thank you,
Mhm.
Lea. And to my audience, I really appreciate your joining us again on this episode of Test Those Breasts. And as usual, I would love for you to go to your favorite platform and rate and review this particular podcast, just because it does really help get the word out to other people around the world about the podcast. I love you all, and I will see you next time on the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Bye for now.